Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley. Folks, I'm not going to give a big introduction or bio to this guest that we have today, but I will give you a clue. Back in 2003, in April of 2003, there was a young man in his 27 years old, was out doing a solo descent of Blue John Canyon in Utah. And something happened. He slipped down this crevasse, and a rock followed him down and crushed his right arm. He was stuck there for several days, and what he had to do to get to freedom and save his life is a story you'll never forget. You may know him by his book, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, amazing read. We'll have a link to that on the show notes today. Or you may remember the movie starring James Franco called 127 Hours. Enough hints. Today we have Aron Ralston on. Aron, my new friend, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it. Oftentimes I'm just simply known as the guy that cut his arm off. So I'm glad you gave a little bit more context to it.
Okay. Well, I do have to tell you this, Aron. My mom has never seen the movie. My mom doesn't watch TV other than the 3 channels she has. You know, she's never read the book. My mom is 90 years old. She'll be listening to this. She's the first guest. She's the first listener of every show. I was out hiking today, and I called her, and I actually spoke to her through my whole hike. And we were talking about I have to go back and do a podcast this afternoon. She goes, "Who do you have?" And I told her, and I didn't tell her about the arm part till I told her your story, and you were hiking and you're climbing these mountains, because I hike a lot, and I said, "You know how he got free, Mom?" She goes, "No." I said, "He cut his arm off." And she went, "Oh my God!" She couldn't. She was she was flabbergasted. So what do you think she said to me? "Brian, you make sure you're careful when you're out hiking." I'm like, "I'm not hiking Utah, man, and I'm not going down in caves and canyons."
But that is a good lesson. Let your mom know where you're going. And be careful. Watch out for falling rocks. Carry a sharp knife. We'll just cover the bases here. Good job, Mom. Until
I watched the movie again last night for the second time, Aron, I didn't realize that your multi-purpose tool you had was actually a cheap one.
It's so cheap it was free, actually. Yes, technically. It had come free with a flashlight. Yeah,
that's amazing.
The thing. No. When I go out with friends and there's an opportunity to hey, we need a knife or something. It's like, sorry guys. Famously, I only carry dull pocket knives, so I'm no use here. But we need to cut the salami and cheese for lunch. I'm like, yep. No, here.
That one you could probably handle with that knife.
I don't know. It was not much better than the handle end of a spoon, really.
That's
but it did get the job done. I'll say after 6 days.
After 6, do you still have that knife?
I do, actually. I'm looking at it right across my office.
Are you really?
I have a little, mountaineering museum, including that tool. It was not the one that I would take, but it happened to be the one I had in my glove box, and I love the sort of the metaphor of that. That they say you go to battle with the army you have, not the army you want. So sometimes you find yourself, cutting your arm off with the tool you have, not the tool you want. But it's how life goes sometimes.
That right there is a great lesson for anybody, I think, going through any problem you have right now in life. It doesn't matter what it is, because I think so often, Aron, when we're going through a problem, obviously not as egregious as yours most often, but any emotional, financial, health problem, relationship problem, it's like we're looking for all these other tools. We're looking for more help, but sometimes you just have to fight with what you have and make the best of it, which you clearly did.
It's the best way to create peace, to find presence in life. It's about being, in this very moment, not in some other moment that you wish you were, or that, where you had more or less, or that you're just here with it. And I think it's really solid advice, especially because that's what we're made of. I mean, if we jumping already into the metaphysics of it all, but that it's really, in the end, it's about our presence in this experience as human beings, that we don't always get to know everything we'd like to know before we have to make a choice or a decision. We don't always get to have all the resources that we prefer to have, and yet we still are in this. And so to give ourselves the grace with that, and also to find the courage to take bold action, because that's really where the genius and the magic of life comes too. It's still about taking that leap, making, as it were for me, making that cut, and not knowing, but committing to a process rather than an outcome.
Oh, I love it. Well, we're going to get into all what you've learned, because I'm so curious to see where you've come from, that 27-year-old man, to now next in October going to be joining the 50-year-old men club here. We'll get into that in a minute. Can you tell all of us a little bit about who you are, like your childhood, where you grew up, Aron, a little bit about your family, or maybe was there any one person that inspired you growing up? So a little bit about your background.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know you're based in Midwest. I grew up in Ohio and Indiana. That I was born out in a rural farmstead. After we came home from the hospital, but I grew up surrounded by cornfields and soybeans and cows, and that was my dad's industry that eventually brought us to Indiana with the Cattlemen's Association, and then to Colorado with the Sheep Industry Association. And I was 11 years old, moving to the West in the Rocky Mountains, and my family, we started going out on vacations to the national parks and exploring all these grand landscapes and getting into the sports and activities as one does. Out here, it's kind of the amenities lifestyle that I still appreciate and pursue today. It was skiing. It then got into hiking and rafting and just all the exploring, and both the exploring of the mountains, but also the exploring that happens internally, which became more of the quest for me as I went through my adolescence and had my challenges. It was among the first boulders in my life, as I make this metaphor about the rock, of course, that befell me in Blue John Canyon, but that I was a kid who had come to a new state, a new school, didn't have friends and relations here, that it was exacerbated by me being an accelerated kid and gifted and talented. Like, I skipped a grade, and so I was the smallest and youngest kid in the whole school, and that didn't go great for me back in an era before we had anti-bullying programs and inclusivity programs and all the rest of it, like that my kids get to enjoy today. But it then fell to my ego and self-esteem project to find a way where I could build myself up in the midst of the feeling from others that I was less than or not enough. And I think it's a pretty universal experience when we have those suspicions or fears that we aren't good enough or that we're not worthy of love or respect. And we then have various strategies, compensations, for me, defense mechanisms even, that part of it was to include the proof to others that I was enough, that I was capable, especially in then areas outside of academics. And of course, you can see, this leads to the explorations, the adventuring, and trying to be not just enough, but even better. And to then do things. And I set about a project in my early 20s where I decided I was going to try to become the first person to ever climb all of the highest mountains that we have in Colorado in the wintertime solo, which was something that had never been done before. And if you think for a moment about why that might be. It had never been done before. It's because it was stupid dangerous, just on the ridiculous level of extreme. And yet I embarked on that and survived my learning curve along the way through many, many adversities, which taught me a great deal about myself, that I was someone who was capable, that I could do things that seemed impossible. And in the midst of that, I was about 3/4 of the way through that project of all these almost 60 mountains that we have that rise above 14,000 feet above sea level, that I quit my career as a mechanical engineer and decided to move to Aspen in Colorado, where I was working in a little mountain shop. And then in the off season of my winter solo project, I found myself out on a walk in the park in Blue John Canyon. And so I was a very experienced outdoorsman by that point, and definitely overlooked some of the potential consequences of my choices that day. I made choices to go by myself, as I often did, but in this instance, I didn't leave an itinerary. No one knew what state I was in. And so I was out in the middle of that hike then when fate would deliver me a very interesting answer to a question that I'd long asked, which was, who would I be? What would I do if my life were on the line?
Well, that question was answered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we have doubts, if we have those kinds of curiosities in our lives, like, am I good enough? Am I worthy? What would I do? I had been inspired by other stories of adventures, misadventures, people who had found themselves on the very edge of experience, of survival, and people who found something in themselves. And I wondered, what's inside of me? Now, that was not on the forefront of my mind as I was descending that canyon that day. I was just out for a good time. I was celebrating a successful winter of climbing, and it was for me to take like spring break.
Yeah.
Winter was over. It was now the end of April. It was 80 degrees out in the desert, just gorgeous bluebird days, beautiful sandstone slot canyons. Not the Grand Canyon. These are micro canyons almost in the sense that they might only be as wide as your shoulders and maybe 5 to 10 stories deep, and that you're descending down. There can be drop-offs, rappels, the down climbs, and it's largely, especially in a canyon that's been documented, it's an adventure, but you still mostly know what's coming. And yeah, I was not at all put off by the idea that, okay, I'm going down through this section by myself, that there might be risks that I couldn't get myself through. Now, that was all without anticipating, of course, that the exact circumstance that befell me, maybe a 1 in a million kind of situation, but that I dislodged a rock that I was climbing down off of that was stuck between the walls of the canyon, kind of an obstacle at the edge of a drop-off, and I was using it to continue my descent. And when I was dangling from it at full extension, as if I just slam dunked a basketball off the backside of it, that I torqued that boulder free from its moorings where it was wedged, and I was falling then in the bottom of the canyon. The rock was falling from my head, and just in a split second, as I put my arms up above my my skull to try to protect myself, push myself out from under the rock, I was successful in that, but of course I'd exposed my hands, and as the boulder ricocheted between the walls, it smashed my left hand just for a split second. It rebounded, smashed my right hand against the right wall of the canyon. It bounced once more, and in that split second, now my hand slipped in between the boulder and the wall even further, as then the walls tapered down in this constriction right in front of my chest, where the boulder became wedged as it had been, but about 7 feet lower down, right in front of me, as I'm standing in this narrow defile in the canyon bottom, and my arm was now disappearing, crushed into this impossibly small shadow between the boulder and the wall of the canyon.
Okay. I've got a question for you. As we talk on here about so much about human behavior and peak performance and the human mind, what is the first thought that what's the first thing that goes to your head when you look and see your hand and your arm trapped?
There was a moment before I even felt the sensation of it where it was just a shock of disbelief of not being able to understand and comprehend. Like, it looked like my arm had been swallowed by the boulder and the wall, that as if somehow I had just like plugged my arm up to like where you would wear a wristwatch into this. It was a gap of about a half an inch, like the width of my pinky finger, as opposed to 3 or 3.5 inches wide that your wrist is there. So it was just the impossibility, the visual impossibility of what I was seeing. And then, of course, there's that's that micro delay of the time it takes for the sensation to travel from your nerves all the way up to your brain, and boom, now the pain, something I'd never experienced before. And that was where, of course, the next micro delay is the adrenaline rush that comes out, where I am filled up with the fury of rage, of energy, trying to harness it, as I had some cognition that, okay, this is actually an opportunity here. Use all that and brute force to try to lift the rock, try to rip my arm free. I was punching the boulder. I was cursing at it like I could be just offended into letting me go. But it was very clear, even though this rage lasted for over 45 minutes, that I was not going to brute force my way through this. I was going to have to eventually, and I did, after taking a lot of deep breaths, I was able to use what I now see in hindsight as a rubric to manage crisis, which is this STOP acronym, the STOP, to stop, take a breath, to T, think my way through this, as opposed to trying to brute force my way through it, that I might be able to make some observations and come up with some options, and P, decide on a plan, that I could use some of that mechanical engineering background that I had, that I would be able to problem solve, like rationally use some of the tools that are in my brain, as opposed to just the strength that's in my muscles to, get myself out of this predicament that I found myself in.
Okay, I got so many questions to ask you. The one question I have for you, and this is a big one. So the one question I ask everybody, quite frankly, and I'm not going to ask you, is what is one of the biggest obstacles you've ever had to come over, or what is one of the biggest challenges you've ever had in your life? Now, let's forego that question today.
Well, I got a list of about another dozen that I can help you out with. Yeah. That are much more universal. Like, I mean, I don't know, I'm interjecting here, but I do think, to humanize me, that I'm not just this character from this esoteric story, but that, I've gone through, like I mentioned, bullying and being ostracized by my peers in my adolescence. That, of course, like financial hardships at times where, cumulatively my debt far exceeded by like orders of magnitude my checkbook balances, and my income. Even that there have been plenty of times where my health has been a huge issue, especially as you mentioned, now that I'm rolling towards 50. That one body part after the next seems to come up with a new boulder in my life. I've been through divorce. I've been through child custody litigation. I've had the challenges that come with having two kids, as well as the fact that they're with two different moms, and sometimes co-parenting scenarios that aren't the most copacetic. The health of my parents. And 6 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and after 6 months, he passed away. All of these things in my life, I've dealt with depression and anxiety. So there are so many of these obstacles, of boulders. And so, without getting down about it, I have to remind myself, just as I did with the boulder in the canyon, is that these things arrive for us in our lives for a reason, and we get to choose the reason. That's kind of the good news about it, is that we get to decide, what is this here for me to do with it? And when we intentionally create meaning around an adversity, that's how we can turn it into an advantage. It's a process that starts with first discerning, this is not just a boulder, a burden, but rather I can make it into a blessing. Yeah, it takes a whole lot of work, and that intention, that determination takes entire maybe years of time and process in order to bring that to fruition. But it starts with the seed, and that first question is, why is this here for me, and what am I going to do with it?
Okay, I want to just interject for a minute here too, Aron, because I think there is an audience member out there right now whose mouth is agape. And I'm talking directly to that member, that subscriber, that listener. You look at, you've watched the movie, perhaps you've read the book, you know Aron's story. I mean, the movie was an amazing hit. The book does fantastic. Great read, by the way, for everybody. But yet you just heard Aron, who you might have saw on the Howard Stern show. You might have seen his skint, his little cameo on The Simpsons. This guy's been, I think, interviewed by David Letterman, if I'm not mistaken, Aron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, I mean, that was such a fun thing. Like, growing up, like idolizing him, being a Midwesterner, and then like, oh my goodness, I'm like sitting here, getting to crack him up. Like, what fun I've had with all this. But go ahead.
Well, I think the lesson here is for that listener out there. You also heard Aron say he also has struggles too, personally, just like you do, just like I do. We all have had financial struggles. Perhaps, I've gone through custody battles twice in my life. I went through a divorce. Many people have health issues, have lost their parents, so many people have faced depression and anxiety. This is not just the challenges and adversity you face. These are universal challenges and adversities. And when you have a gentleman like Aron on here talking about how he still faces these things at times, we all do. But the idea is those adversities they arrive for a reason, and we get to choose the reason. I love that. I love that, what you said. And you have to find meaning around, and why did it happen potentially, and what am I going to do with it? I mean, that's probably the greatest lesson I've heard in 150 some episodes for anybody, which means all of us who are going through, have gone through, or will go through some type of adversity. So I appreciate that. I think that was perfect. That was a nugget right there that we get to hear from somebody who actually went through something very challenging and traumatic at one time in his life. What, 22 years ago, Aron? Yeah, 22 years ago this past April, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I marked that anniversary because it was this time where I was given the greatest gifts that I've ever received in my life from that experience. Not just the initial entrapment, but all of the gifts that I would receive from that boulder over the following nearly 6 days that I was down there before eventually that I'm amputating my arm. And to skip ahead a little bit to say that in the end, even the act of amputation was one of these incredibly powerful gifts that I received from that experience, because I was smiling as I'm going through that ostensibly horrific act to be cutting through my arm. And yes, it made the sensation that I felt of being trapped by the boulder now feel like a 0 on a new scale of 10. That was this incredible euphoria. Also, because of what I was doing to get myself out of there, to give myself a chance to take a step out of what became my grave and back into my life again. That is, again, the potential that boulders have within them. And there's a line, Shakespearean, that nothing is good or bad so much as what we think of it. And that's the idea that our minds, the choices we make, are our power, and they are the most powerful tool that we have when it comes to facing our lives. It's the meaning we put behind something. So for me to look back and be able to say, on day 2, when I was out of options to get myself free, that I knew that I couldn't cut my arm off because I wouldn't even survive making it back to my truck, let alone driving out of the desert. I'm like, why did I have to buy a stick shift? That I've got all of these options that have failed to get me out. I can't carve through the rock. I can't lift the boulder, even with all the mechanical advantage systems that I've built with my ropes and canyoning gear. That I can't wait for help. No one's coming because no one knows where I was. That all of it means that I'm going to die here. But what do I do in that moment? The gift that the boulder gives me is to understand I can get my camera out and I can say goodbye. Wow. And I talk about that as a gift because what it did was it connected me with what was really important in my life at a time when, could you be more isolated in the universe? I don't know. Maybe those Apollo 15 astronauts stranded on the backside of the moon and eventually made their way home. But it's like to be out in this most remote desert in the bottom of a hole where no one's going to find me until I'm a skeleton, and yet to be able to turn on my camera, look through that video camera's lens, and then connect with my loved ones, my mom, my dad, my sister, all of my extended family, my closest friends, and to be able to say these incredibly important things. I love you. I'm sorry that I'm leaving you. Thank you for everything that you've given me in my life. That those words, those connections, that brought me into this place of being filled up with love. And there was no room for despair because I just felt gratitude. That was an incredible gift to me. And I've used it many times in my life since then intentionally because I learned that lesson. You cannot simultaneously hold profound despair and profound gratitude in your heart at the same time. They displace one another, and you practice gratitude. You say thank you. You go over it's like a Thanksgiving time to understand what it is that you've been blessed with. And that to me picked me up. It gave me the strength, the courage, the determination, the perseverance, the resilience, everything that I was going to need. And it was there for me because of that rock showing me what was truly important in my life. It was not a list of my achievements and accomplishments that went onto that video camera. It was a will and testament in a way, but the primary service that it gave me was the ability to know that my loved ones would be on the other side of that lens watching that, even if it were after my death, but that's what showed me what I had to hold on to and what would fuel me over those coming days. It certainly wasn't just a few cups of water that I had in one of my Nalgene bottles. By that point, it wasn't the little bit of like 2 convenience store burritos that I had left in my food supply by the time I became trapped. It wasn't the inadequate clothing. Didn't even have a jacket for the 40 degree, 38 degree, 36 degree nights that I'd be shivering through. What was going to keep me going was this connection to what was important in my life. And what I learned was that it's loving relationships.
Amen to that. Thank you for saying that. Do you think, Aron, if you wouldn't have had that little video camera with you, what would that have changed for you?
I think I would have found another way to have achieved the same I guess process. Maybe I would have taken my knife and started etching a letter to my loved ones into the wall of the canyon. Maybe if I'd I had some paper with me that I could have figured out how to write something to them, or have simply taken pictures on my other camera. That I would have figured out a way, and maybe it would have just been through the prayers that I also I used that as a tool to connect myself with greater energies in the universe, and that I think that could have sufficed as well. It's something that we are these energies, and we forget on our daily experience that tends to be fairly superficial. Those moments when we can take a pause and remember to breathe and to connect with our presence and to come back to something that's really rooted grounded in the spiritual reality of our existence here, and yet, we forget to do that, or we get caught up. And myself, I'm not immune to that. But those kind of communications that happen energetically, let's say, rather more than physically, that's no less real. And I had experiences while I was trapped of seeing my mom and hearing her, and would come to find out, talking with her afterwards, that yes, I was sitting on those stairs in our house, and I was telling you to hold on, that we were coming for you. It was almost telepathic, like that. Something beyond what I would say is like, oh yeah, I believe in psychics. I believe, I think I find myself more on the skeptical side of things. I'd like to have some proof that it exists, and yet, that was, in a way, it was a personal experience that does provide proof that we are connected in ways that we don't always see until enough gets stripped away and out of our superficial level experience that we see something greater that's underneath it. That in the end, before I went through the final night of my entrapment, when I'd written my epitaph into the wall of the canyon, I had said my final goodbyes on the video camera, that I had an experience, an out-of-body experience, where I was in a living room and I saw what I knew to be my future son, and he came running over me. I scooped him up. I was dancing with him, and this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy, about 3.5 years old in that moment, wouldn't be born for 7 years from now. But at this day here, he's 15 and a half. He's upstairs doing his online academy. We're going to go play lacrosse later in the afternoon. He is that little boy who came to me and showed me that I was going to have a life after the canyon. And that, I have never had a more mystical experience in my life. That something that showed me very clearly how we are connected in love through, like, across time, across distance. That it's the wormholes of our of our spiritualities that bring us to be everywhere and anywhere, and that's something that served me. And also today I can sit with and know our mortality, even with my dad being now on the other side of this, that we all come from some great pool of consciousness into this experience, and then we go back to it, and that pulsing, that breathing of our lives. And it brings me peace to know that, and to be comfortable with it. So again, more gifts from this canyon, from this boulder.
Well, that's the question I would have for you. You were a mechanical engineer, obviously. You went to Carnegie Mellon, I think. You went to CMU?
Yep.
I went to the other CMU, Central Michigan University, and in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And we'd go on. I played rugby in college, so we'd go on rugby tournaments, and our jackets always said CMU Rugby. And at tournaments, anyway, we had so many people. Oh, you're from CMU? Yeah. And they'd start talking. I'm like, I don't think we're talking about the same CMU here. They were talking about Carnegie Mellon a lot. We were CMU. I don't think we ever played Carnegie Mellon in a game. I don't recall, but that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, we didn't have a rugby team.
Oh, you didn't? Either, so your son plays lacrosse. What position?
Yeah. Oh, he's in attack. I played lacrosse in college. That was my travel thing. I was also in the marching band. So we would travel sometimes to support the football team, and very, very goofy, silly experiences with all of that. But yeah, he's found his passion, and it's something I just adore for him. That at this point, his sister plays lacrosse too. She's just about to turn 12 now. So they're 3.5 years apart, but that's, anything he's doing, she's got to be in and doing it too. We go skiing, and there's backpacking. She's in Scouts, so we were just up in the mountains a weekend ago, and wading out into lakes and hiking cross country through wildflower fields, and jumping doing jumping photos up on the Continental Divide, like just so many amazing experiences with my kids that have come true because of that connection that I first touched on when I was in those moments when it was. I thought I'd even etched into the canyon the death date of April 2003, and then as I had this experience with my future son, and at midnight the clock rolled over, and all of a sudden it was no longer April 30th, but it was May 1st, and I even had to decide whether or not to scratch out April and carve into the wall May, because my epitaph was outdated now, and yet it was just the clarity. Like, okay, that doesn't matter. But what did matter was that I was going to see the other side of this experience in the canyon, and again, what gifts that boulder gave me to understand like the power of love, of these connective energies in the universe that I would get through. And so in the end, was that final dawn gave way, and I saw the sunrise that I'd said I wasn't going to see because of this vision of this little boy that I was then like so sure I was going to get home to someday to see him. And that's how in the final moments, I can say I was smiling as the idea comes to me that I don't have to use the knife to try to cut through the bones in my arm. I can use the boulder and how it was holding me to gain leverage and bend bone in my arm enough to break it as it snaps, and it's this cap gun kind of starter pistol. The sound effect is crack in the canyon, and yet this smile gets even bigger because I know I've solved it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get home. I'm going to get a hug from my mom. I'm going to see that little boy, and then I still recall how all of a sudden this ecstasy resolved into the understanding of, oh, wait a minute, there's another bone there. And so I had to do it again, and that same crack had broken the same spot. And this mechanical, engineer, as we mentioned, that mind took over, and it was just, okay, what's next? How do we overcome that? Put the tourniquet on, keep cutting. There's the nerve. Yep, this is just going to happen now. And yet, as I sucked in my breath, as I severed that nerve, and I resolved as I exhaled, and I was smiling the biggest smile I've ever smiled in my life. I was getting through this. I was going to finish it, and I had to stretch my arm. You stretch fabric in order to cut through it, put a little tension there, and then that tension released. And I stepped out of my grave and into my life again. And the smile was I felt the pain there, but it was the possibility that was far more important. The possibility of everything in my life coming back to me, that I had the chance now. Maybe it was a 1 in 1,000 chance, but that it was still a possibility that I was going to be able to get out of there. And I did everything I had set out in my mind. Like, okay, I know which direction. I'm not going to head back to my bike. I'm going to head for my truck, continue down canyon. Maybe I come across water. I'm going to get to the big drop rappel. I bring my rope along. I've got my arms slung and tourniqueted to my, just doing the basic first aid that I could. And along the way, though, I even stopped and I took a photo before I left the boulder, and I said thank you out loud in that moment.
You have to have that picture framed somewhere, don't you?
I mean, I put it in my book, and it's definitely what I actually have is a replica fiberglass model of the boulder sitting here in my office that I'm looking at as well, from the film set from 127 Hours. Okay. It's got James Franco's blood on it and all this. Because the gratitude I have for that rock, it showed me what was important to me in my life, what was possible for me in my life, what was extraordinary about being alive, and all of that. That's this gift. And again, the choice I made to say, I walked out of that place, but I didn't leave. I didn't lose anything. I left something behind, but I only gained from that. That this is the choice that I made. That this was not horrific, but rather the best thing that's ever happened for me. And it was far from over. I I did on my way out hike for almost 5.5 hours. I covered 6.5 miles of ground. I run out of water that I found at the bottom of the Big Drop Rappel. I'd been moving, just staggering my way, but I lost over 2 liters of blood. During that time, I hadn't slept in 6 days, so just the exhaustion. I'd lost over 40 pounds. I had just nothing left. And yet, as I come to the moment where, like, I'm having a heart attack from just my body shutting down and there not being enough blood to pump in my system to get oxygen to my brain, and boom, it's happening. And what I realized is the roar, that it is building in my chest, that it is somehow expanding outside of my body. And I look up and there's a helicopter that passes by and circles around, lands, and plucks me out of the canyon. And I know that it's the other side of the equation of that connection and love that I had with my family through the video camera, that this was my mom's projection of manifestation of her love, as she had figured out how to motivate search and rescue to go find me, not even knowing what state I was in, but they tracked me down and plucked me out of that canyon when I had minutes left to live, and that helicopter had minutes of fuel left, in this miraculous synchronicity that gets me to a hospital before the helicopter crashes or it bleed to death. And I'm here because of that miracle. That's to me the other side of this, is that it's these, again, these big energies that are out in the universe, and how they, we're these little particles that ping around and bounce off of each other, and that we're connected through these fields of force that's how miracles happen.
It is. You would have told me this 15 years ago, I was the biggest skeptic of manifestation or energy. And then I realized probably 12 years ago that this is, I base my whole life on it now, that it's now, there's so much science behind it. I mean, it's not psychobabble bullcrap. There's science behind this as well, that we're energy, and energy really never dies. It just goes from one form to the other, and we can pass energy every time we communicate. You and I are passing energy on with each other, and we're therefore to the audience when this goes live. So people don't understand that. They understand Wi-Fi signals, telephone signals, radio signals, but they don't realize we give off signals so often. And I think there's nothing more powerful than that now. So I went from a complete atheist on these ideas to a complete believer of just energy being it's the sole controlling force of our universe.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that it's like, it doesn't require you to believe for it to be true either.
Right,
it's like facts and science just are, and so you can choose to, I think, leverage it and use it and be aware of it, and that's, I think it's a beautiful thing. It is my experience, and certainly I feel is why and how I'm here. And so I'm glad to hear, that resonates for you, and I hope that it does, for the listeners here too. That it's something that's so much bigger than us, and that we have free will, we have choices to make, and also that it's a beautiful thing that it's not just up to us either, and that was something that brought me great peace. And I want to share this on that line of thought, is that as I came to accept my situation in my entrapment, and as it applies to just about any other boulder that I meet in my life today, that acceptance is where we can come back to the peace that we have in our lives. That it's when we resist what is, when we resist the will of the universe, when we resist the power of the energies that are around us, that's where we create dissonance in our lives and agitation, even inflammation. That it's something where, when we can align ourselves with what is, with what the will of the universe, that's where we have peace, and we come back to something that is our natural state of being.
I know this is a lesson I know I have to learn. I've learned it over the years more and more, but I'm still not there. The whole idea of acceptance, That's always been a struggle for me, is accepting things where I'm like, okay, I mean, like you in that canyon, when I first watched the movie in whatever 2007, 8, whenever it came out, 2010, whatever, I didn't see acceptance. I saw a man with an internal fight. But then when I watched it last night, so this is now 15 years later, or whatever the time frame is, I've matured, I've thought more. I did see a man, because I never really paid attention the first time to you, James Franco playing you in this case, doing the videos. I didn't really that didn't connect with me. But then it did. Last night I was lying in bed with my iPad watching it, and I thought, this is a man right here who just knows that this is the end. And I asked myself that same question that you mentioned earlier. What would I do in this case? What would I say? And so in order to get to that point, you almost have to have an acceptance that this is probably the end. And if that's the case, what am I going to do? And the messages you delivered to your family, to your sister, to your mom and your dad I don't think you can go there until you had that acceptance. Because we always want to say, well, it might change. It might change. Well, that's good to have hope, but there are some things we just have to accept. You control what you can control, you influence what you can influence, and you accept what you have to accept. And if you can live life by that simple rule, it gets a lot easier. Trust me, life is still not what I would call easy, but it's a lot easier than it was 10, 15 years ago for me, when I was all about what can I control? I don't want to accept anything. But you hit the nail on the head. When did you realize? So I would think, though, Aron, that obviously when you broke free from the boulder, you felt free. Was there a moment when you knew that I'm going to live now? Was it the helicopter, or did you feel that way all the way out of the canyon and through when you had to rappel down and you were walking towards your truck? Was there a moment?
No, I was just committed to the process. If I knew something, it was that the odds were stacked so heavily against me that I was not going to make it all the way home, that I was not going to have the life that the possibility of that was propelling me. But there was much closer to a certainty that I was not going to actually survive my escape. Now, that said, by the time the helicopter arrives, it gets me out of there. I make it to the hospital. I walk into the trauma room. The anesthesiologist shows up with this incredibly large needle that my eyes made it look like it was a battering ram. And the morphine goes in and boom, fade to black. But when I came out of that, and what I didn't know is I'd been transported to Grand Junction, Colorado from Moab, Utah, that I'd undergone 15 hours of surgery, had 7 liters of saline dripped into me to replace the fluids in my body. That all of this, and I come to, and all I know is that, wait a minute, I'm in pain. That means I must be alive. And that was when I knew, okay, I'm here. I might not be here for long, but I'm here. And it was the same sentiment I had, as I was escaping the canyon. I within about 45 minutes of freeing myself from the boulder, I was down at the Big Drop Rappel, and I lowered myself 65 feet down to the continuing canyon, where it opened up out of the slot canyon, and it was now more of a box canyon, 100 feet wide and hundreds of feet deep. That was where I took a selfie of standing there with my amputated arm up behind my shoulder and looking into the camera. It was just to say, I'm still here. And so much of the way it's that's enough. And I know you mentioned about the role of hope, and I think we think about hope being a good thing, and yet it also, I think we have to recognize that it's the flip side of fear, that it's about putting ourselves in a position of thinking about a future experience that we are afraid of having, or that we hope might having, but it's still not this moment. And this moment is the I'm still here. And that's the declaration. It's all we have. And yes, I think the nuance that you described around acceptance and control and hope, and that all of that is true. To let go of control, where where we're deluding ourselves, and yet still to exert our will as we can, to know that, yes, acceptance of what is right now does not mean that we don't have a role to play in creating a future of what will be, that could be very different than what is right now. So there's certainly, I think, layers and perspective to take there, subtlety in how we talk about it. And what I think I'm trying to get to here is this idea that where I was just staying in that moment of moving myself through without knowing that I was going to live, knowing that I was going to see that child. I didn't have that knowing. I just knew one more step, Aaron, one more step. And then as I'm in the hospital and like, I'm in pain, I must be alive. That, okay, I'm alive. And then my mom walks in the room and I'm alive. And she holds my hand and we're crying and looking at each other and sobbing. And that it's like finally through all these tears where I can say, I love you, Mom. I'm sorry. I love you. Same things that I said on the tape, but it's looking into her face and her tears dropping down on me. She's squeezing my left hand so hard I thought I was going to lose that hand too. And then she says that it hadn't been a broken leg that's kept you out in the desert all this time. I swore to myself driving you that you were going to have 2 broken legs before I was done with you. I'm just like, did I mention I love you? I'm sorry. And just how it's like, it's all just in that moment. That there was never, and it was a good thing because like, I didn't know, but come to find out, yeah, I gave myself a bone infection because of the unsanitary tools and conditions that I was operating in. That I almost died from that in the weeks following the rescue, and so many surgeries and just the whole miracles of science and modern medicine that it took in order for me to survive the aftermath of my experience, not just the experience itself. And so that, yeah, I guess I keep coming back to this idea that there was never a knowing, there's never a guarantee, none of us know we're going to walk out the door and, anything can happen. And so often, so many things do happen, so that it's just to know that it's this moment, it's the connections that we have. It's not necessarily a promise that there's anything more than this. And yet we can live within that presence and know that that's everything and it's enough.
I agree with you on that. When I do these podcasts so often, I love them all and I've enjoyed every single interview. There are a few that I feel like were timed perfectly for me. And this is one of those ones. I needed to hear this today. So, what right now? So you've gone through this. Now you have a 15 and 12-year-old child, you have a 15-year-old son, 12-year-old daughter. What is a win for you in life? What would you say is a thing that you say, okay, that's a victory right now. I feel great about that.
I mean, especially for having kind of like a tweener and a teenager, that it's the little things of like when my daughter like comes around to my door to give me a hug before she goes to the school building, even though like some of her friends are still outside and could see her do it. It's about my son, asking me to go and like throw around lacrosse with him, even though he could be calling his friends to set up time with them to go do it. That it's I look at it as it's those wins that come along from the relationships. We talked about age and about health, and like I think one of the gifts that my body is giving me right now is this maturity that to understand. Whereas I would have taken a health challenge as something to overcome and to like just dig deeper and still go out and do everything, that now it's this gift and this lesson that there's times to slow down, that there's times to heal, that it's finding the victories in something that otherwise can look like, but it's, a younger version of me would have said, but but that's defeat. Like, that's failure. That's not doing. How is not doing a way of being that's better than doing? And so there's a lot of wisdom. Like, I think that can feel like a victory where, oh, I am growing. I'm not the same as I was 5 years ago, 15, 22 years ago. That's what looks like a win in my life. And of course, so much of it comes back to relationships, about times even where it's with my co-parent relationships, and where I remember to de-escalate rather than escalate, to where I elevate the value of having peace over the value of holding someone to account or getting my way, or any of the other things that can feel like a defense mechanism or a success strategy until they're not, until you realize the consequences of that. And then you say, oh no, there's something that's more important than that for me or for my kids. So yeah, there's a lot of things that look like wins and victories that I think, especially 10 years ago, I would not have said that that's something that, I would not have heard myself say the same thing.
As you were talking about that, that's what I was thinking about. What would a win look like for you 10 years ago? Because I'm the same way, Aaron. My wins, I do it every morning. Well, 6 mornings a week. When I get up, I have a really weird, strict morning routine for about an hour and a half. I don't veer Monday through Saturday. Sunday through Friday. I don't do Saturdays. And one of them is I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for at that moment. Right before I journal. And I just going back, if I went back the last 3 days of this week so far, I guess the third day. One of them was my son and I hiking on Friday or Saturday, and right in the middle of the hike, I was rucking. He just turned around and gave me the biggest bear hug. And I melted in his arms. I started tearing up. Or it was one of them was my grandson getting up and coming. I'm staying with my daughter right now for a couple of weeks, and him coming downstairs in the morning at 6:30 or 7 o'clock and jumping on my lap, wanting to watch something on my iPad while he has his breakfast in my arms, and just curled up. And it's those little things that are wins now. And 10, 15, 20, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know, that may not have been, my wins were like, I got to get more clients. I got to get more speaking engagements. And those are all just icing on the cake. The cake is the little things that, like you said, and it always comes down to relationships. I would say 90% of the things I'm grateful for, sometimes it's a warm cup of coffee in my hand or the birds singing outside. But, there are all these, most of them are like, you would seem seemingly minor things that you might just go through life and they happen to you, but you never take note of them until you actually stop and think about them and show gratitude for them.
Yeah, the little things are the big things. Yeah,
they sure are.
And I think whether you're a parent or, as a spouse, a partner, a leader, that reflection and consideration of the importance of connection and relationship, that it boiled down to it. I even said it on the video camera as I was trapped and as I was reflecting about the meaning of life, that I expressed that it's not about what you do, Aaron. It's who you are. Mm-hmm. It's how you relate. It's how you love. It's how you interact. And that is our legacy. That is the gift of our presence to others, that's how our consciousness, that's what we're here to manifest and to bring out. And as I think we all can at least set a goal for ourselves, that to be kind in that, to be caring, to be compassionate, to be empathetic, and that's wow, like what a gift of adversity is, that it's not just that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but it also has the capacity to make you softer so that you can connect with others through the traumas that they've had in their lives, and that you can be there for one another. That's, as I've heard it said, that, that's what we're here to do, is that we're all just walking each other home.
Ooh. Well, I'm going to share this with you before we wrap up, Aaron. So right now I'm going through a fairly difficult emotional time, and for the past month. And what I would typically do in times like this, and I've only gone through a handful of these in my 58 years of living, is I would typically feel sorry for myself for a little while. I would kind of I would slack off a little bit and, just get lost in the misery, for a couple of weeks. Well, this time I decided to go the opposite approach. I said, I'm going to double down on finding happiness, and seeking happiness within me. And what that has done for me is I've worked out harder. I've eaten better, dramatically cut my alcohol down. I have been reading more, journaling more gratitude, reaching out to people more and saying, okay, I need help, or I could use your guidance right now. And I really think it's not just coincidence that I'm talking to you on this day. And I want to share with you the thing that you did, that energy you sent to me today was when you said something about, I feel pain, so I must be alive. I like that a lot. But the one was, I'm still here. That's such a basic, simple statement of all the worry that we might have, or all the things we're thinking about in the future, or, mistakes we made in the past, or even problems that we're facing currently in the present. I'm still here is such a powerful way to reframe the mind, to focus on that one most beautiful thing that you have right at any given moment, is that you're still here. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. I really do.
And that's enough. I think my overall thesis is that, yes, we don't get to control what happens to us. We get to choose how we respond. That when the boulders arrive, we draw on the strength and the power, the gifts of our relationships in order to find our resilience, to transform those boulders, put that effort in to make them into the greatest blessings that we could ever receive in our lives. And along that journey, it is enough to just still be here. I'm glad that resonated for you.
Wow, that did. Well, I'll wrap up now. I know you're a busy person. You got to go to lacrosse here in a little bit, but my son played lacrosse in high school and played. He's not playing his last year of college because he's putting a lot of time into his classes and graduating. But he played in college as well for 3 years.
Oh, awesome!
He was an attack.
Where did he play?
He played attack, but now he played in college. He played midfield. He was a midi. In college. So one of the greatest sports. I coached it for 5 years. Like youth lacrosse, but I never played it. We didn't have lacrosse growing up in my small town, so I never played it. But all three of my stepsons, my bonus sons, played it in high school. One played it at the collegiate level, then my son did as well. And then when my oldest bonus son was a high school coach for a couple of years in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But family came, babies came, and now he's not coaching anymore. So it's been a part of my life for 20 some years, but never played it. Even when I coach it, I refuse to pick up a stick because there's no way I can catch that ball on a stick. So
that's funny, but I'm glad to hear. I mean, I feel more connected with you through that too. And it is an incredible game, and also there's a lot of incredible sports. There's so many benefits to being a part of a team and to having a passion. Like, I'm so happy for my son. Like that's something that feels like a win in that regard of watching your child develop to see a passion take hold, and to know what passion has done for me in my life, where it's compelled me to the greatest heights of experience. Mm-hmm. And so I'm psyched. I think that's something for any of us who are looking for peak experiences or peak performance, that that it comes from having that passion and that motivation.
Amen. Well, brother, I want to take the time to thank you thank you for taking so much, taking that experience you had, and really, you didn't just change your life. You've really impacted millions of people. You literally have, through the book and the movie. So, and the movie seemed pretty authentic and everything. Les Stroud from Survivor Man said it was one of the most authentic survival movies of all time. So, and
I appreciate that. It was very authentic to my experience too. I mean, I wish I'd gotten to go skinny dipping with Kate Mara. Like, that did not happen. It's part of my experience, but maybe next time I'll hold out for that one.
Well, is she the one that was on Schitt's Creek?
No, that she was. in House of Cards in the first couple seasons there. And has also done a bunch of other movies. And Amber Tamblyn also, great actor, and playing Megan and Christy, the two women that I encountered early on that day in the canyon, and just as now I take a second to say, it's fun because every once in a while we get back in touch with each other. I've been in touch with them here in just the last week because we're starting to work on a documentary that for a streaming platform that'll be out in the next year or something like that, year and a half, and it's pulling all the folks from the real experience to talk and tell our story of this for really the first time. Having everybody together to, give this gift to even more people in the world who need it. So that when it comes across someone's maybe a time in their life where they're experiencing darkness, and to shine a beacon to remind people that we are connected, that we are so much more than that darkness, that there's something that's shining in us, and that's the resilience and the love and the power that we have to keep on with our being here. So I hope that it can do a great deal of work still to come. I've long known that this was not just for me or for my family, but that this happened for all of us as a reminder of what we're capable of.
Amen. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. You have been an amazing guest.
You too, Brian.
I really do.
Yes.
This has been amazing for me, and I know the audience is going to connect. I know we're going to talk for a few minutes after we're done recording. But again, Aron, thank you for being such an inspiring guest, actually, on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Awesome. It's my honor. Folks, I just want to say, I know this is an episode that's going to resonate so much with so many. This is exactly what the Bamboo Lab podcast is about. Probably the most, I would say, symbolic. Well, when I was looking to start this podcast 3.5 years ago, this is exactly the type of message I wanted people to hear. So please, I'm going to ask you to please rate and review us. Please share this episode with 3 to 5 people. But more than anything, in the next week or two before I talk to you all again, please get out there and strive to give your best in everything you do. Please show love and respect to others, and please show it back to yourself, and please live with purpose and intention. I appreciate every single one of you listening today. Until next time.